Taylor.
Wow, wow.
I grew up working in the business and stuff, and I inherited it pretty young. My grandpa got cancer, died. My grandma got cancer, died. My mom got cancer, died. My dad got cancer, and my stepdad got cancer, all in 3 years.
Okay.
Deep, and like I grew up financially like very well off.
Yeah.
Like I'm not trying to build an influencer career. Like I'm a rich fucking artist. Like I'm incredibly financially fortunate.
Pretzel.
You got money. He got money. Get it off.
Y'all, we have a new season of Love is Blind. It's in DC. I looked at their ages. I'm like, okay, they're older, they're employed, they're hot. We should have the most successful, non-dramatic season of Love is Blind yet, right? Right? No. It looked like we had so many promising love stories, but you guys, the producers jam-packed as many couples as possible, and it is still the same level of messiness, the same level of chaos. We need to get into it. Hi guys, welcome to Nikki Faces Reality. We are here to discuss season 7 of Love is Blind. Again, it is in DC. I'm really excited to get into it. However, Netflix dropped 6 episodes and they're over an hour long. It was a lot to get through. I just was like, okay, what notes are important? What do the people need to know? So in this video, I'm gonna give you guys the rundown of the couples that are making it out of the pod, so to speak. I'm gonna give you a snapshot of their love story, what drew them together, the potential red flags. So I'm gonna be covering the couples within the pods, and that's episodes 1 through 4. And then I'm gonna make a separate video of them in the honeymoon in Mexico, episodes 5 to 6, okay? So as you're watching these videos, if you feel so inclined, do let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, because it really does help me a lot. And if you're new here, do subscribe. I make commentary on reality TV, mainly 90 Day Fiancé and Love is Blind, but more to come. So if that's your thing, definitely subscribe. And yeah, you guys, this season kicked off. I'm like, okay, the budget is budgeting. Got some new backdrops. The guys are singing Ain't No Mountain High. And I'm like, okay, they cleared the song. Money. Of course, we see the Lachey's. Like them or love them, they're here to stay. We see them talk to the singles, and you know, I understand that when you're married, you're in a bubble, but you would think that if you're hosting a dating show, you would be familiar with the lingo, because one of the girls brings up a situationship and they're acting like they've never heard the concept. 7 seasons in. Then we get like a Snapchat B-roll of people saying ludicrous things, like this woman quit her really high-paying job because she's like, it's preventing me from finding a man, so I quit my job to be on the show. And I was like, okay, girl. Then there's another girl in the pods being like, I hate lettuce. I refuse to have lettuce on anything. And it was just like, okay. And I'm not saying your preferences aren't important. I'm just saying that you're trying to find a husband. I feel like there are more important things to address before lettuce. Same thing with the guy that asks the girl what her go-to Trader Joe's snack is. I'm like, okay, let's move on. The one thing I can relate to, I think it was Ashley A. in this B-roll. She's like, dating in your 30s is like going through the clearance rack. It is rough. And I couldn't relate to that sentiment more. However, going on the show, I don't think is any better. But anyway, we're going to jump straight into the couples. The first one is Garrett and Taylor. Garrett is 33. He's a quantum physicist. And Taylor is 30, a clean energy policy consultant. These two are so gorgeous. If I'm not mistaken, they are the first couple to get engaged and meet. These two have similar backgrounds in STEM, and they have like this nerdiness, and it's parallel in many ways. He has a freaking quantum equation, I think he said, tattooed, and she has a hydrogen. And so with them, like, it's really cute. There's like a balance between heaviness and lightness. I love that he from the start was like super forward. Like, he would tell her, I'm already missing you. I think that she's a little more reserved in that. And from what we see with her, she does enjoy a little bit of like the cat and mouse. Like, she really wants him to earn like affection and her love, and we get to know a little more of that later on, but that's her vibe. But I think with him, we're seeing a lot of his realization when he tells her loving things, because he apparently has not been in a relationship for 7 years. So he was like, what do I have to lose by being on this show, you know? But because of that, I think that there's like this hesitance in jumping in all the way. But I don't think he has a problem so far with Taylor. And her thing is that she's been really, really intentional about not hinting at her looks, not talking about her background. And this comes up when they're talking about their parents, because they both value family. So he asks her, like, what are your parents like? What's your relationship like? And she can't stop raving about them because they're incredible. But she's like, yeah, everybody loves my mom and they like to like talk about her name, but I'm not gonna tell you. And the way that it was delivered was a little strange, because he's like, what are you hiding, you know? And she's like, well, if I tell you my mom's name, it's gonna give away my ethnicity. And I just feel like there was a better way to express that. But yeah, she was like, I really want you to get to know me for me. I don't want you to, have these preconceived notions. I want you to really fall for me. And then, like, I'll happily tell you about my culture, because I think that there are important conversations that we need to have in connection to it. And so at first, Garrett's reaction to this, I was like, is this going to be a problem? Because he says that he's only dated white women. And that's not a problem. It's if you are not open to that. Like, I just couldn't read his reaction. I'm like, oh, are you about to make this girl feel uncomfortable when you eventually meet each other? Like, what's going on here? But he was saying that, he's open to ethnicity. It's just he feels like overall throughout their experience in the pods, she is very calculated. And I don't think calculated was like the nicest word to use. I think that it triggered her in many ways. But he's like, yeah, I feel like you think about everything that you say so carefully, and it makes me feel like you're curating how you're appearing, and like, what are you hiding? And I think that that's a valid thing to say, especially because so many people come on the show to get like a bigger platform. Taylor obviously is super successful. I don't think she needs an influencer platform, but I think that that's a valid fear for him to have. And so, yeah, again, I couldn't really read Garrett's expression. I was like, are you disappointed that she didn't tell you that sooner? Like, is this gonna be, an issue? Like, oh God. He receives, what he says, and she's like, you know what? Thank you for the constructive criticism, because like maybe like that is something that I do. Maybe I am too in my head and need to like let my guard down a little bit. What I did like about these two is that they don't shy away from those uncomfortable moments. They kind of just dug it out, and it continues when they have a conversation about children. There's a moment, I guess an insider between them is that they want a lot of plants, and we see throughout their time that he gives her like a lot of flowers as gifts. Well, in one of them, she gifts him like an avocado plant, and she says, yeah, like this symbolizes how in 5 to 7 years, like it'll fruit more, and like that's kind of the timeline that I want for children. And he's like, 5 to 7 is a long time. And he's like, is that something that we can compromise on? And at first she's like, no, like there's no need to compromise on that. And I was like, oh God, she's about to be like, no, like I'm done. Like I'm a career girl. I need to do this and this. But instead she says, I feel so close to you. And like, if we were to take this leap, basically she would throw off that timeline. I don't know if I believe her, but I think that that was a sweet thing to say in this moment. The biggest thing I think with Taylor, I can tell that she's had to be a tough cookie. You know who she reminds me of a lot? She reminds me of Natalie. Do you guys remember Natalie and Shane? Maybe like season 1 or season 2 of Love is Blind, I forget. But Natalie was always like kind of rough. Like, she was a little rough in like the jokes that she would make. Like, she would basically like make fun of Shane and be like, haha, but like, you know, I love you. Like that kind of energy. Taylor has that same energy. It's a little rough and like she, for example, she's like, okay, so like, are you gonna ask me to be your girlfriend? And he does, and she's like, well, you have 2 hours to earn it. And he's like, wait, like you just asked me to ask you. And so there's this like, again, this push and pull. What he says is like, if I have to convince you by now, I think we're in trouble. And I agree. Like, you've already been saying I love you. You guys have been dating exclusively in the pods. So it's like, what is this? And I do think that they share like a bit of a dry humor, but I think that she does take it like an extra step. And I think that, you know, it's charming now because this relationship is new, but I could foresee it being an issue when they're like at the honeymoon in person. Things like that get a bit old, you know, like just be direct. But there is a bit of a turning point. First of all, he knows that her favorite flower is a sunflower. He surprises her in the women's quarter with like this vase of sunflowers and like this childhood note that's like, will you be my girlfriend? Yes or no? And she's like, maybe. And I was like, girl, if you don't check yes and cut it out, she does check yes. And so in the next meeting that they have, he has a box in his side. And apparently she put in one of the letters that her grandfather wrote her grandmother. And it was like this heartfelt note asking her for her hand in marriage. She reads it out loud and she's crying the whole time. And she's basically, you know, bearing her soul to him and, you know, telling him her intentions. And he's stunned. I don't think he expected this from her. I don't think he expected to be so overwhelmed by this. Like, this connection is weird to have. Like, you know, this person for 9 days and you're in love. Like, it's a lot. But he tells her, he's like, I didn't expect to find you, and I know you feel the same way. And he gets on one knee and he proposes. And when it's time to meet, I was really nervous because I'm like, please don't be racist. Like, please acknowledge the fact that you probably have one of the prettiest girls in here. Honestly, all of the women are beautiful. But I think Taylor is stunning. Her fashion the whole time she's been in the pods, I'm like, if I had no boobs, I would wear every single outfit. It just looks chic. It looks stylish. All of the colors look amazing on her. And her proposal meetup dress is no different. It's this beautiful satin royal blue. She looks stunning. The doors open. They're like, oh my God. And they start making out for so long. They're making out the whole time, basically. And it's like an equal amount of awkward and equal amount of like playful and like, oh my God. And like whenever they don't know what to say, they just make out. It's really cute, really funny. Yeah, it's really cute. So that's enough of them in the pause. We'll see them in Mexico. The next couple is Ramses and Marissa. Ramses is what? 35. He's a program coordinator. Marissa is 32. And during the show, she was a law student, but I'm guessing now she's a lawyer. Marissa has an infectious personality, okay? I really do think that this girl could have matched with Adore and it would have been a magnificent love story. Like, she just has that energy. And she says that she does not have a type, and I believe her. She says that, like, she was in a 3-year relationship or something with a Trump supporter. Like, she could literally be with anyone. And so it's no surprise that for the most part, she was stuck between two guys, one guy named Bowden and then Ramses. So the problem is that her two suitors were very similar. She was choosing between Bowden, who also has a military background as she does. And so they connected on that. They connected on their love for fantasy. However, it didn't really have much of like the romance aspect that she has with Ramses. But for a while, I didn't know where she was going to go because Bowden and Ramses both like have similarities. They both could banter well with her. They both were previously married. And it was equally awkward and hilarious when the two guys realized that they had her down as their number one. They're like, oh, how, like, because to them, they think they're so different. Like, how can she like both of us? You'd be surprised. Marissa was like, yep, those are my weirdos. Overall, though, I really do think that she handled the love triangle aspect pretty well. She kept all of her dates really light. She really wouldn't talk about them too much unless they would bring it up. But I do remember it affecting Ramses. He was really in his head about it because he was like, well, maybe she'll choose him because he's more masculine than me. Honestly, both guys couldn't be further away from the hyper masculine. So I see why she was leaning on them. Obviously, Ramses recovered, okay? That became her number one. Every time he would go into the date, he'd be like, hola, mi amor. I don't know what his background is, but it was cute. So at first, I couldn't really read him because I'm like, are you just another artsy F-boy? But I really do think he's a chill dude. He has this little rat tail thing going on that I hate some episodes and love some episodes. I'm like, I want to know the story behind that. But one thing about Ramses, the whole time he was like, you're my number one. Where's your head at? And she would always be like, I'm keeping it open. I mentioned that he was previously married. Apparently, they were together. I think, were they high school sweethearts? Something like that. They were together from very young. And he obviously grew up and evolved and figured out who he was and found himself steering away from his religion. He grew up in a really religious household. So he just went through like a metamorphosis and like that marriage no longer fit. But he talks a lot about, the exploration of his character and feeling like he doesn't really fit into like the hyper masculine like norms and like what that has brought up for him and the kind of friendships that he has. And Marissa seems really into it. She says that although she's dated mostly masculine men, that's not what she wants. And she has wanted to explore things with people like Ramses. And I really do love that he's presenting a spectrum of masculinity. I think that it's funny that they are matching each other's vibe and they have no idea yet. They're both wearing leather or pleather like pants and skirt. Like, they already match each other's aesthetic and have no clue. Once Bowden is officially out of the picture, like, they really gush over each other and just, like, how freeing it feels to, like, be with each other and, like, how it feels like there's no judgment. And they get to talking about kids and housekeeping, and he tells her, he's like, I don't believe in the gender norm that it has to be all on you. And she's like, yeah, I really want to break away from, like, gender norms, and he's all with it. At one point she's like, I am going to be doing my job because I would go crazy if I stay home, but the kids, so I think I'd be open with you being a stay-at-home dad. He's not all in on that. He's like, I'm gonna keep like a remote job, but I'd be down to being the one that's mainly at home. So I'm like, okay, I feel like they could really flow well. She's just like, oh my god, he's my unicorn. Like, she just thinks he's perfect. And this energy will continue, you guys. I want to add, though, with Marissa and Ramses, mainly with Marissa's nature, I think that she really goes with the moment, whatever feels good. And I think that there were moments that she forgot that she's picking a life partner in this show because she would get carried away with, like, just things that don't really matter. Like, and she was like, can you mount a TV? Can you like build stuff? And he's like, I'm resourceful, like I could figure it out. But then she was like, oh my God, wait, I haven't even asked you your birthday. I don't even know your age. Like, are you 24? Like, I can't handle that. And I'm like, you've been in the pods at this point for a million years. What do you mean you don't know his age? You usually find that out on the first day. What have y'all been talking about? There was a moment too where like he wrote her a letter and like had her read it because he's like, I'm not the best with my words, but like he wanted her to know exactly how he felt about her. Have this real conversation of her like feeling like he brings calm into her life because she can be so much, but she also expresses that she has a fear of being left behind because, people pick her because of her looks and they think that they can handle her upbeat energy. And actually they're like, you're too much for me. And he says that as long as there's a balance, he'll be fine with it, which I don't think she fully like heard that there is a condition in there. But overall, these two are just like, I love you. I want to lock this in now. So we do see him propose to her because he's like, I know that I can be my full self with you. It feels so good to be at this place where like I accept myself, you accept me. And she says that like she loves his sensitivity and like she loves how he loves her. And there was a time that she didn't feel worthy of this kind of love, and like she's just so happy like that they've arrived to this place. And so him and his rat tail get on a knee and propose, and it's beautiful. And then it's time for them to meet. You guys, they are so beautiful. They are the epitome of bi panic. I didn't know where to look. They're so gorgeous. When the doors open, they look stunned. They're like, wow, I hit the jackpot. It's very sweet. They're like kissing. They're like, oh my God, look at you. And like, I don't know if I get married couple from them. I'm getting like friends with benefit vibe, but that's just like my first impression. But also, they're getting so caught up in each other that they forgot to like do the act of proposing in person. So he has to propose in like the dressing room area. It is chaotic, and I have a feeling that these two will continue to be that. Let's get into the next couple. I think this one is going to be a short one because I was very confused by them. It's Stephen. He's 34. He's an electrician. And then Monica, 37. She's a sales executive. You guys, the whole time I was watching these two, I was like, how exactly did we get here? So when we meet Monica, she's like, listen, I'm so excited to try this experiment. I feel like it forces you to lead with compatibility. And she's a little guilty of going for the guys with like delicious arms and, you know, guys that look like arm candy. And this is really forcing her to like focus on what's important. And so one of her first dates that we see with Steven, I think she asks him like when was his last relationship, and so he says it was like 2 years ago, but he's like, yeah, but it was like the healthiest relationship I've ever been in. And she's like, oh, that's great. And he's like, yeah, you know, I really value good communication. And she's like, yeah, of course. She's like, yeah, it's all about communication. Like not every day is going to be a good day. It's about understanding that it's okay to have bad days. And he's like, yeah, totally, because, you know, no one's perfect. She's like, yes, I'm drawn to flaws. I think flaws are so beautiful. And he's like, yeah, I'm happy you said that because, you know, I've had a flaw in the past. And she's like, okay. And he's like, well, since we're sharing, you know, I'm not proud of it. But, you know, in that relationship that I said was the healthiest one I've ever been in, yeah, you know, I was considered a cheater. But you know, everyone has different concepts of what cheating is. Not this man trying to mansplain what cheating is. Like, just say you're a cheater and go. And you can see her taking notes furiously. Like, she's like, I don't want to miss any part of the story. And it gets worse. He says that he didn't feel like he deserved his last partner. And so what he did was he emotionally cheated by hopping into someone's DMs, having, you know, conversations with intent of doing something, but never doing it. And the way he's talking about it, like it's like a hypothetical, like, scenario, I'm like, you cheated. You're not considered a cheater. You are a cheater. Happy I could clear that up for you. So for a moment, I couldn't tell where she stood with that because, again, she was writing down every single detail. But she's like, thank you for telling me. I actually think that you're being harder on yourself than you need to. And I was like, I'm sorry. Did I enter the Twilight Zone? But what she says is like, I'm 36. Like, obviously, people have lived life. And totally. I just don't think that it made sense that she was like, you're being too hard on yourself, as if he was the victim. He was the cheater. But what he says is like, yeah, we went to therapy together and I'm still in therapy. And I'm always weary when men mention therapy too much. I'm like, oh God, you're about to make this your entire personality. And this is just what I think about him initially. Funny enough, I actually do like Stephen in the long run. From what it looks like, I feel like Monica is really not moved by much. She's not fazed by much. She just gives the energy of someone that has heard it all and is just like, honestly, I've heard worse. It's fine. She asks him about politics and like who he voted in the last election. And again, every answer that Stephen gives is long-winded. And this is going to be a reoccurring thing, potentially a problem. But what he says is that he's a veteran, so, you know, that affects who he votes for. He says that he did initially vote for Trump, but he didn't agree with the moves that he was making, so then in the next election, he voted for Biden. And for a moment with her face, I was like, can she get over the cheating, but she can't get over politics? Like, where is she going to go with this? But no, again, she was just like, things are changing. People can like have a variety of opinions. And I'm like, wow, she's sticking it out with this guy. Okay, okay. But then they get into identity politics. And he goes into like a long-winded story of how for the longest time, he thought that he was like Italian, some sort of percentage of Italian. And then through an Ancestry.com test, he realized actually, my dad is not part Italian. He is black. He has West African in his bloodline. And when you look at this man, he looks like he has black in him. In the Dominican Republic, we have a term called habao. Habao is when someone is white by skin, but they have like certain like Afro features. So it can be that you have like kinkier hair, certain like facial features. Like there's just like some telltale signs that you're like, you're one of us, you're just white. And he has that. So I was laughing because I was like, oh my God, your grandmother knew this whole time and she lied to y'all. I understand that like race is so complicated and people really did not want to blend. But this man, like it led him into like almost like an identity crisis and he immediately jumped into like doing research. And so, yeah, he has like all these books on West Africa because he really wants to understand that part of himself, that small part of himself and that huge part of his father's life that like was robbed from them. She loves this story. She loves that he loves his like 1/3 blackness. She's Afro-Latina. I think she says Honduran and black. Beautiful. So she's like, I love everything about this. She's just so smitten by the whole ordeal. Like they have been having hard conversations. You could tell that she's a bit of a straight shooter and he likes to go roundabout things, but overall they are really jiving and I just didn't see it coming. And I think the reason I was very confused at their like energy is that it's the editing. The editing this season is so choppy. It was hard for me to understand how they had such like a nice love story because we didn't really see them falling in love. It was just like date 1 and then all of a sudden date number like 8. Like there's so much that was missing. But we do see some small moments, like she says that she still sleeps with a teddy bear. I'm not gonna judge, but she is like 37. But she's like, yeah, like, I'm telling you that. And he's like, honestly, that's a little weird, but I'm a weirdo too, so like it works. And again, then all of a sudden it's like, boop, way far out, and she's crying, saying that he reminds her of her dad, and like she feels so close to him. Like, I can't believe that I found you. And he gets on bended knee and he's like, if you're bored with your last name, like, will you marry me? And it's like a really sweet moment. And yeah, they're engaged. And it's time for them to meet and propose in person. And she's like, I've been waiting 36 years for this. You guys, she looks like a model. Her in this like gold shimmery gown, I'm like, he's going to have a stroke. While she's waiting, she's talking about like all of the baptisms and birthdays that she's been in to support other people, and it's finally her turn. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that I'm so emotional over these two because it didn't make sense to me. Finally, the doors open, they see each other. You guys, when I tell you that the passion was palpable, first of all, she was about to like pass out. So they had to sit down because she was like, oh my God, like it's you. And like there was a moment that she kept whispering, and I'm like, you were yelling in the pods. Like, why are you whispering now? It was really weird. But after the nerves like shook off a little bit, he was twirling for her, she was twirling for him, and they were just like making out. It was hot. Aside from the ring, he also gave her like a shirt off his back, and honestly, she was on cloud nine. I really liked it for them. I was very confused by them, but I am looking forward to seeing more of their story in the real world because I think that that's really going to play a part because they are still at their core very different. So I'm looking forward to seeing that play out. We're going to move on to the next, you guys. Tim, 33, he's a web content strategist, and Alexandra, 33, a producer. Alexandra's 33. Honestly, we should write that she's 16. I was like appalled by her. And I think I was shooketh because when we met them, I did not like him. And I'm not sure that I like him still, but I like her less. So when we meet Tim, he's in the break room and he's wearing this like yellow shirt, which I think was nice, right? But he's like, oh yeah, you like this shirt? Well, I asked this girl that I used to date which shirt I should get, and when she saw this one, she said, ew. And so I got it to spite her. It's funny that he felt a way about a girl giving her opinion that he asked for. That was one. But also, the fact that he was like so proud of himself that he did something to spite her tells me everything I need to know about his character. He is a tit for tat person, and that would make me run for the hills. And the thing about it is that he doesn't make secret that this is who he is. So I was like, oh God, like, are you gonna give Uche vibes? Yes. Yes, he kinda is. When they announced that DC would be one of the cities, this is the archetype that I expected to see. Again, this is first impressions. He kinda changed for me later, kinda. But this is the archetype that I expected because, you know, you think DC, you think a lot of like important jobs, guys that may be on a high horse, guys that, you know, may view themselves as the prize and treat women as less than. Like, again, these are all projections that I made off of him based off of this introduction. Not saying this is who he is. And it doesn't help that he says things like, I used to be a dog in the past. I still have like an inner dog. And like this dog situation comes up a lot. But what he says is that for the longest, he's had the body of a man, but a mind of a boy. And like now he's at a different place and he wants a wife. Anyway, we finally see him on a date with Alex. She makes it no secret that she's into astrology and she wants to get the lowdown on his personality. I think he says that he's a Virgo, but he has a lion tattoo, so people think that he's a Leo. And he's like, yeah, you know, I have a Leo because I really admire their leadership. And when I get married, I want to get a lioness tattoo. So he asks her, like, what is the difference between you seeking a relationship and you being here and seeking a husband? And she gives a really heartfelt answer. She says that, you know, marriage is for better or for worse. And she knows firsthand just how important that is. So both of her parents have MS. Her dad has MS and she has seen the way that her stepmom, like, really has stepped up for him and like bathes him, takes care of him, like really like physically takes it on. And then she has seen the other side of the spectrum with her mother. When her mother got MS, her partner of like 15 years dipped because it was just too hard. And so she, has seen the hardships that her mother has had to endure. And like she wants someone that is going to be there through anything. I was crying through this segment because I've dated someone that has MS. We dated for like 2.5 years, and that was really hard. Like, just you feel really powerless because they're going through all these like changes, and I can only imagine viewing that as like a child and feeling powerless, like you can't help your parents in the way that they really need. She asks him the same. He's like, I never had to question commitment because my parents exemplified that. And it sounds like he had a really beautiful family life. He refers to it almost like a sitcom. What he says is that he's never had to question their commitment to him, to each other, and he wholeheartedly like agrees with her, like for better or for worse, because he says that he has seen some hard days, but he doesn't think that they've been the worst. So from episode 1, these two seem to be on the same page. He says, I don't want to live married, I want to die married. And she's like, so I was like, okay. And so while I don't like him at this point, I really do like that level of like intensity and commitment. Maybe that's my toxic trait, but I was like, okay, I see you. Now, the thing with these two, you guys, I feel like a lot of their dates were so heavy. There was like a lot of trauma dumping, and it was inevitable, right? Because you want to give this person like a full scope of what your life has been, like the pain that you've endured. Like, it's important to talk about, but it just felt like every date they were crying, specifically when it came down to him talking about his sisters. He's the younger brother, and he had two older sisters that both passed. He specifically chose a particular college because he wanted to be in the band. Him and his sisters used to sing and play instruments. But then he got to college and he was like, actually, this isn't for me. And then he joined the Navy. And then he said the Navy was the best thing for him. And then he was like, actually, I need to get out. And so I'm noticing a pattern of him like romanticizing something, and then when it ends, like, that's the problem. I don't think he fully like acknowledges his role in these things, and that would be a red flag for me, because I think, okay, so how long is it until I'm like the bad apple in your story? You know what I mean? My spidey senses are tingling. But he says all of this to basically get at the fact that he didn't finish school. And I think it's like a chip on his shoulder, but the way that he like combats it is that he's gotten really far in his career, where like he can be at these tables with these people that he once looked up to, and he can look them in the eye, which leads her to like talk about her background. As that, I think she says her grandfather was like the national treasurer for the Nation of Islam, and that like he didn't believe in college. But she goes on to say like, yeah, like we have a picture of my grandfather and Muhammad Ali in my house. And he's like, oh my God, Muhammad Ali is my idol. Was it Muhammad Ali or Malcolm X? Who was it? She's not judging him on the school thing because, again, like her grandpa wasn't in support of it. And then she said that her parents encouraged her to do school, and she got all the grades, but then when it was time to go to college, there was no money. So she really doesn't put it like up on a pedestal. If anything, it made her question the education system and the lack of access. He tells her that his sisters passed, but he really wants to keep the memory alive when they have kids. Like, it's important that they know who their aunties were. When he starts talking about his sister's death, I think he's talking about one of them having lupus. Like, at this point, their faces are just soaking wet, like so much crying. Like, it was a really tragic loss because, again, he says that he had like this perfect family, and like they've experienced such deep losses, and he's always going to be their baby brother, but now like we're his sisters, So he likes to talk about them a lot. He wears like one of their rings. Like, he really likes to keep them present, which is a beautiful thing. I couldn't imagine that kind of loss. But what he says is that I'm looking forward to giving my parents one more daughter. When I tell you I lost it, I was like, oh God, this could either be the sweetest thing or the most manipulative line ever. And I hate that I even think that, but that's what this show has made me, you know? It's not all trauma dumping. We do see a date with these two just like eating, painting, and it's nice to see that they can have fun together and he acknowledges that. Underlying from all of the playing that they're doing is that they do like to tussle a little bit with words. And he says that he does like someone that's gonna fight back, and she is really competitive. But up to this moment, it still seems like really playful, really sweet. And I'm realizing now that we're seeing mostly this side of her because he doesn't really ask her a lot of questions. I feel like maybe it's the editing, but it's mostly focused on him and his experience. Yeah. Keep that in mind. There is a scene where he gifts her like one of his sister's bracelet that was gifted by the other sister. So again, it's a way to keep them all like present, but also to let her know that like I trust you with this. Like this is like a prized possession for me. And then when it's time to propose, like he has flowers for her. They've swapped the paintings that they made for each other. And he reads out a letter that he's actually written to her father, which is like a letter asking for her hand in marriage. And it is so romantic. And he says that he plans on giving it to her father when they get past this. But yeah, like what a sweet gesture. And it obviously means a lot to her because she's like the ultimate daddy's girl. And we see that come up a lot more later. But yeah, he gives her that. She says yes. Now it's time for them to meet. And she's a gorgeous, gorgeous girl. But I was like, oh my God, yeah, I never thought to be like, oh, she is a curvier girl. Until she's standing there and she says, she's like, what if he doesn't like me? Like, I'm not a size 2. But she looks stunning in this red dress. She's showing the girls. Hair is cute. Face is beautiful. It opens and he's like, I knew you were fine. Good job, sir. Good job. They hug, they embrace. He takes out the ring. She doesn't even give him a chance to get on a knee. She just like takes it and put it on her finger. And he's like, oh, okay. And this is where I think things go downhill for my perception of Alex. One, I forgot how old she was because she kept like touching her hair profusely. And I remember doing that in middle school where I'd just be like, and she didn't have to do all that because she was just in a dressing room with a bunch of mirrors. You know what I mean? But she literally just kept, like, he would be talking to her and she's like, yeah. And I'm like, can you stop? Aside from that, he likes what he sees and she'd be like, look up here. But her girls were out and he was like, you know I'm a dog. And she was like, stop saying that. But he said that all through the pods. And now we're seeing a trend of her being annoying by him saying that. He does say it a lot. Prepare for Mexico. But yeah, he's doing a little bit of growling and you can tell that she's like being playful, but she's actually annoyed. And these two are a handful. I'll tell you that. Let's move on to the next couple. So the next couple is Tyler, 34, account manager, and Ashley, 32, marketing director. Y'all, this is our golden couple. Every season, there is one. If you are of the melanated experience, we always look for our one hope. And I hope that Tyler and Ashley don't let us down. When we meet Ashley, she says that she only wants to get married once. She comes from divorced parents and she's just determined to make it work. Since she was a little girl, she has promised her mom that like they're gonna get that happy ending. And now she's, a career woman, gorgeous on her own. She's like, I need to make this happen for me. These two hit the ground running. They talk about everything. I mean, they connect from being foodies to being philanthropists to talking about kids and talking about sharing passwords. Like, There is no stone being left unturned. And he's saying all the right things. And at first, you can see that she was being like, like, maybe you're too good to be true. But as the episodes went on, she would be like, wow, like, you're perfect. Like, I can't believe that it's this easy. But it's really refreshing to see because they are acting their age. They're really grown up. They're really like getting straight to the point. They're saying what they mean. They're not afraid to like say like, wow, like I'm really connecting with you. Him more than her. And I find that this is a trend with the ladies this season. I feel like they're being cautious with their heart, and totally understandable. There is a funny moment where like they are both raving about cooking for everyone in their quarters. And she's like, yeah, I made eggs. And he's like, oh, well, I made stuffed French toast. And she's like, oh. He's impressed because like no guy that she's ever dated has cooked, and he's like, yeah, I love to cook. He's like, I would love for that to be my role with my wife. He's like, I want to protect, but I'm also down to do the other domestic things. I'm telling you guys, they talked a little bit about everything. There's a moment that she's like, yeah, I want to skydive. And he's like, I'm terrified of heights, but I want to skydive too. And she's like, well, my dream is to skydive the day before my wedding with my fiance. So it's us like figuratively taking the leap of faith before marriage. If we survive, we get married. And you already know that the minute she said that, Netflix started planning it. And that's so smart. Make that happen on Netflix's dime. And so then she also asks about his childhood. And he says that it was rough because his mom is Serbian and her dad completely cut her off because she had mixed race kids. And so he was like, yeah, we struggled. She worked so many jobs to support 3 kids, and like it was hard, and we only had our grandmother, and then our grandmother got sick with cancer and died. And you could see that he has like all this like pent up guilt from feeling like he wasn't able to support his mother. But I'm like, you were a child. Like, there was a lot to process. And he expands a little bit that he felt like he was a little cold and didn't really know how to comfort people because he didn't receive that as a kid. And so that made dating like harder. But that's just so hard for me to believe because he's such like a cinnamon roll with Ashley. Like, if anything, in their like partnership, he is soft at all times and letting her know where he stands. So I guess thank God for growth. Ultimately, he's like, listen, like I want the family that I never had. And I think that was the turning point for Ashley to be like, oh, like he gets it. He's being real with me. And while we can see that she's all in, like it takes her a minute to let him know. And from the start, you guys, they are the sweetest. They are already acting like husband and wife. Like they like exchange blankets that smell like each other. They're sharing meals together. He wrote out a prayer just for them. Like, it's everything she could have ever wanted. At every point, he's like, thank you for like letting me feel so comfortable with you. And she's just like, oh my God, like you've been sincere since day one. They're just so romantic. We also saw a date of theirs where they were like exchanging playlists, and the song lyrics were very intentional. And that's when she just like broke down and started crying because she's like, oh my God, like I deserve this. And so then we see the day that is his birthday. She like has balloons in his pod, a slice of cheesecake. When she comes into hers, there's flowers, and it's really special. And we're like, oh my God, just another day, it's romantic. No, it's his birthday, but he wants to leave there with a fiance. She has no idea though, because she comes into the pod with a letter of her own, wanting to basically like bare her soul for real. I think up to this point she was holding back, but she wanted him to know exactly where she stood. She declares her love and like thanks him for choosing her. And I was a mess because I'm like, oh my God, like this is the safety that she said she always wanted as a kid. And like, could it be that she's getting it now? I'm such a hopeless romantic. I was like eating it up. And Tyler again is like gracious that she like bared her soul and is like on bended knee, and he like proposes, and when she says yes, he like melts into the ground. And so when it's time for them to like meet each other, this woman is stunning. She's wearing this gorgeous black gown. One thing that I've noticed about Ashley is that she is very like reserved and a bit more on the conservative side. But she is regal. She is so beyond gorgeous. And I just knew that he would lose it when he saw her. They see each other, they embrace, they just do a little peck. Classy, demure. And he is stunned, she's stunned. They're another couple that didn't hint at looks, didn't talk about it at all. So you can see that they're just like taking each other in. But I think my favorite part of this whole thing is that he's looking at her and he's like, nothing has changed for me. Everything I said is true. Like, I love you. I just love that direct affirmation of like, we're still here, you know? Now, you guys, the final part of this video, which I feel like is a beefy one, is the love square, love triangle situation that occurred. There's always one. So we have Nick D, 29, real estate agent. We have Hannah, 27, medical device sales. We have Leo, 31, an art dealer, and Brittany, 33, esthetician. Whew, bracing myself because I'll be talking for a minute. When we meet Nicky D, he is a smooth talker. He is a former football player. Maybe he co-opted this swag, but he's like opting into this like suave persona, and all of the girls are like, oh my god, F-boy. They rule him out. We see him on a date with Hannah, and when he mentions that he was an athlete, she's like, oh my god, like I used to be a cheerleader. Like I was totally the cheerleader that dated a quarterback. She's leading with this information, okay? I think that also I should give a little backstory that Hannah was the woman that said that she quit her high-paying job so that she could be on this show to find love. Quitting your job is risky. But again, she's like, you know, people are superficial and this is a way for her to find love the true way. You guys, I am immediately getting Chelsea vibes. Immediately. And this is not to shame her because I obviously deal with body stuff too. I feel like everyone does. I'm a product of the early 2000s media. I feel like we all deal with fat phobia in some way. But she's another mid-sized girl, beautiful girl, that's on this show and has a chip on her shoulder because she's like, I'm not a skinny mini, like that's gonna be an issue. And big girls, fat girls get love every day. And like there's work that you have to do to feel secure in yourself. And I just find it interesting that the most insecure girls put themselves in this kind of situation where you are literally being put up against other people. Like if you're insecure, this is not the ideal place to find love. Yet here we are with a girl that obviously feels little about herself and is like making it everyone else's problem. This is where we meet a new player. Leo. We see Hannah on a date with Leo. Leo again is an art dealer. Hannah is like, oh my god, art, Europe. I love Europe, and talks his ear off about all the places that she's been to, things that she wants to see, that they want to try, restaurants that they want to go to. They haven't touched on anything heavy, anything of substance. Leo disagrees, and he's like, actually, so much of marriage is having dinner together. So I'd say that this is important. I guess, right? So Leo. Let's talk about Leo. Leo has taken over the family business. He is making bank, okay? And he says that this is usually an issue because he doesn't know if people are in it for him or for what he can provide. You'd think that because this is such a huge source of like inconvenience for him, that he wouldn't lead with this information, right? Right? Okay, well, let's go see him at his date with Brittany. Brittany, the girl that says, yeah, my dream is to be a trophy wife. And not knocking her dream. If that's what she wants to be, there is an audience for that. There is a man out there that will happily be like, yes. But Leo's saying that he doesn't want someone that wants him for that. Brittany in her one-on-one is like, I want to be a trophy wife. I'm used to dating athletes and rock stars. And she basically describes wanting the stay-at-home wife, like benefits without actually having to cook and do all those things for the kids, which I think is the dream for our moms. Being a mom is hard work, so I'm sure that every mom would want, you know, some levity in their role, but Leo said he didn't want that, remember? What I do like about Brittany is that she is unapologetic herself. And if you pick her, what you see is what you get. Like, you can't say that you were deceived. The way that the guys are like responding to her in the pods, like, for me, proves that love is not blind, because when they hear her, they're like, oh, she sounds ditzy. She must be hot. I would totally pick her. She's definitely a smart girl, and she's used to having people underestimate her. And that in itself is like one of her superpowers. Leo is one of those guys that is totally like, yeah, she's hot. And he says, he's like, from everything that she says, I can definitely see myself dating her in real life. And it's just funny that early on, Brittany masterfully pivots every conversation to know more about his background, his upbringing. So in one conversation, she's like, so yeah, tell me more about your family business. What's that like? So the funny thing about Leo is that he talks about his fortune as like the most unfortunate thing that has happened to him. And I can see why, but the way that he talks about it is like fake humble. He's like, I'm really fortunate to be 30 and not have to worry about money. In fact, I grew up rich. I never had to worry about it. And as he's talking about it, she's just like sipping her drink, like, yes, this is what I wanted. Fell right on my lap. But then he actually breaks down how it came to be. And it was like his grandfather passed, then his like parents, then his like uncle, aunts. Like it was just like back to back to back deaths due to cancer. And yeah, so he got all of these different inheritances at once, plus the money from the family business. So he is rolling in it. And the whole time he's like, yeah, you know, like all these inheritances just came my way, and like, wow, like here I am, just rich. And I think he wants her to feel bad about the fact that now he has all this responsibility, but all she can hear is probably like, cha-ching. And she's like, so, you know, this brings me to like an important conversation since, you know, we're already talking about money. How do you feel about, you know, responsibilities and expenses? Like, are you like a 50-50 guy, or do you cover everything? And he's like, well, you know, I would like 50-50, but it doesn't make sense to do 50-50 if I make more money. And she's like, oh my God, I'm so relieved that you feel that way, because the guys here are just like so hardcore about 50-50. And like, you know, in my last relationship, my guy covered everything. And you could see that Leo's like, like, oh God. Like, I mean, it's not a problem because I could cover everything, but also like, I would like for us to both feel like invested. I'm always a little jealous of girls like Brittany, because I wish that I had the cojones to like ask for this, because I feel like girls that don't ask for anything at all get the bare minimum. So you might as well like ask for what you need and get something, you know? And she's like, listen, like it's expensive for my maintenance, for nails, for hair, for skincare, for my Pilates classes, to keep my body right. So like, yeah, like it would be nice if you covered it. And I have to respect it. I have to. So when she says this, there's a huge pause, because he's like, damn, like, I know she's hot. I can bet on it that she's probably hot. But I'm also like, is she only after me because I have all of this money? And so he's like, listen, I can provide. I want us to have a nice, comfortable life. I just need to be sure that whoever I marry is going to be with me, even if all this art gets destroyed in like a hurricane and I'm left with nothing. And she's like, yes, totally. Like, if I wanted to just be with someone for money, I would have, you know, been married. And for some reason, that's enough confirmation for him. And they go straight into talking about baby names and like planning a future without like getting to know each other like deeper. It's just like straight into baby names. Like she wants to lock it in. But there is another funny moment where we see him in the break room talking to the guys again, like his misfortune is the most unfortunate thing, until a guy peeps that this man is wearing a Rolex. They're like, oh, all right, screw you. But it's just funny that he's like, I'm not here to be an influencer. I already have tons of money. Like, I'm really here to find love. And you could just see the sympathy leave the other guy's body. Like, they're checked out. But as I mentioned, this is some sort of like love triangle. And he's torn between Hannah and Brittany, who could not be more different. But he's torn because he's like, Brittany is someone that I would go after in the real world. Hannah is someone that I'm really drawn to, but that we would probably not have connected in the real world. So he really like wants to take advantage of this experience to the very end. And so far so good, because that's what you're supposed to do, right? And so we see him on a date with Hannah. And he's like, I dreamed of you, even though I don't know what you look like. Like, I dreamed of your presence. He's also like, I just want to tell you that I love that you haven't asked me many questions about my job. And she's like, yeah, partly because I don't really know what you do. Like, I don't really get it. And we see a date with Hannah and Nikki D. And as I told you guys, Nikki D, like, has a horrible reputation with all the girls because he's just, like, playing up this suave guy, this overconfident guy. So he's asking her, like, what she's wearing. And she has, like, this sexy librarian look going on. I'm mentioning this because it leads them to have a conversation of what their crushes are. He says that his crush is Scarlett Johansson. She says that her crush is Henry Cavill. And Nikki D says that he kind of looks like him. And I was like, oh no, don't say that, because it's the whole Megan Fox thing of it all. When you tell someone that you look sort of like someone, they start having this image of you and then they're disappointed. So he's already setting himself up. And when they start getting into this territory of like trying to like figure out how they look, she steers the conversation away because she's coming into this with all of her insecurities and he has no idea, So she really desperately doesn't want to discuss looks. But then he's like, are you ready for Mexico? Like, do you have a hot bathing suit, like, ready to go? And she's like, no, I don't. And she's like so offended that he would ask this. But again, it's like all her own like feelings around it. And you could tell that she feels really uncomfortable, and he picked up on it. And he's like, I'm going to like you regardless. Like, I'm going to be super affectionate. I'm going to give you so many compliments, which is something that I feel like she will need. But I think that she's still like on the fence with him in this moment. So she's not really believing anything he says. When we see her in the break room talking to the girls, telling them that she was just on a date with Mr. Suave, they're all like trolling her. She's like, no, he's really the love of my life. Like, you guys don't know him like I've known him. And they're like, yeah, okay, like, whatever. And so then they go to the men's room, and like Leo is making impressions of Brittany and again saying that like she's someone that is kind of predictable for him to go after, and that he's really debating like about Hannah. And one of the guys is like, oh, like, I think Nick is talking to her. I don't think he knows you're talking to her. And in this moment, I can see the shift in Leo where this became a competition and he wanted to win Hannah just so that, like, he gets to choose between the girls. But if someone else takes her from him, like, he can't have that. And I hate that I saw it happen. Like, I saw it click in his brain. And he's like, yeah, like, she's really young, so I don't really think that she would know what she wants. So like, I'm like, what? So you think that you can sway her, that you can manipulate her? It was nasty. And this is where I really am like, oh, I don't like Leo. They pan back to the girls' room, the girls' like common area. And Hannah's talking about Mr. Suave. And in this scene, she kind of proves Leo right, that she doesn't know what she wants and that she is easily swayed. because she's like, you know, thinking out loud, saying that he's so suave. I feel like he could probably flirt with anyone. Do I want to be with someone that is so flirtatious? And because he's so confident, like it makes her like doubt herself and be less confident, which is a her problem. I don't think it's a him problem. Because she views him as this suave guy that can be with any girl, she's like, oh, that would make me feel like there's a lot of pressure to be perfect at all times. At her core, she doesn't believe him. And she's spewing all of her insecurities because he really hasn't done anything bad to her up to this moment, you know? And so the girls don't like him and they're like, you know what to do. Like, basically, you know you have to break up with him. You don't feel good about him, then just end it. And so then we see Hannah have her date with Nick. He has no idea that she has had these talks in the break room. He's coming in like confident in his love. He's ready to propose. Like, he's on cloud nine. They sit and she immediately is like, we need to talk. You guys, in this moment, that's when I realized, I was like, oh my God, the Nick that we saw at the top of episode 1 and the person that we're seeing now are night and day. Like, this confident, suave guy is definitely like a facade that he puts around new people, because in these in-depth conversations with Hannah, he seems so like forward with his feelings and like affirming, and not like he's playing games. Like, it's really coming out with like his heart in his hand. And I understand why she had like those perceptions of him being an F-boy, because I did too. But unlike the other girls, she kept dating him. And so she obviously saw the good in him, and she saw the drastic difference between their first date. So like, no one can make a grounded decision more than her, except she's not grounded. Because she's coming in with her insecurities and everyone else's like whisperings. And she's like, yeah, like, I just don't trust you. Like, you say the right things, but something in me tells me not to believe you. And he was like hurt, but he was like, I'm going to have to, you know, accept whatever decision you make. And ultimately she ended things with him. And he was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going home because I want you, and like, you don't believe me. And I remember in this moment writing in my notes, like, I think that Nick isn't going to be a good fit for her because she clearly has things to work through that he's constantly going to trigger, and it's just going to be in circles. But Leo is not the better option for her, because I think that he ultimately would cheat on her with Brittany or cheat on her with someone else. Like, I don't think that he would really go for Hannah in the real world. So I'm like, Hannah, you should go home. But yeah, she breaks up with Nick. Nick like takes it to the chin. Like, he tries to fight it. He realizes that like she's set in her decision, and he walks away. She goes back to the break room. She's talking to the girls. Brittany comes in, accidentally mentions that she was on a date with Leo, and they're like, oh. So up to this moment, the girls had not shared who they're each seeing. So in this moment, when Hannah realizes that stunning Brittany is her competition for Leo, she's like, oh no, I messed up. I shouldn't have broken up with Nick. I'm guessing this is like the next day or like maybe later that night. Brittany goes on a date with Leo. She's feeling tense. She's like, oh my God, like, unfortunately, like, this happened in the girls' room, and like everyone knows who everyone's dating, and it's just a bit uncomfortable. There's a little heaviness, but I want to like protect what we have. And he's like, yeah, totally agree. But Brittany is usually like light and bubbly. And in this particular meeting, she's like really like down and like teary. And she's like, I hate that I know that you're dating other people. Like, I hate that that was confirmed to me. And I'm getting Jimmy and Jessica vibes, you guys. Because there's always the point in the experiment where people like forget that it's still an experiment. That while you may be in a different spot in your journey, the other person is allowed to date to the very end, because that is what you signed up for. And Leo is like, trying to make her feel good, being like, everyone probably underestimates you because you're so bubbly, but I see you. I know you're so smart. I know that you have a big heart. Like, hang on with me. Like, wait, see it through to the very end. And she's like ready to go home because this is bringing up feelings for her of like, feeling like the guys that she's after have other choices and like they usually go for other choices. So she just hates that feeling of being in competition. And it doesn't help, you guys, that Leo is probably the dumbest man on earth. He says all of the wrong things. In this moment, he's like, honestly, before this, you were my number two, but now you're both my number one. And she's like rolling her eyes because she's like, that doesn't make me feel better. But as I mentioned, Hannah immediately regretted dumping Nick. So she like requested a date with him before he left. They got back into the room and he's surprised that she asked him back in, and she was like, I have so many regrets. Like, I definitely like led with my insecurities. Like, it has nothing to do with you. It's me. Yeah, I was talking to the girls and like they said this, and he was like, wait, you broke up with me because other people didn't like me? Like, that would be a major red flag for me. Because it's like, who's in this relationship? You, me, or like the village? Like, what's happening? What she says is, I wanted to hurt you before you could hurt me. And again, this is really showing her age. But also, she's talking to him about her insecurities. And I understand that this is Love is Blind and you shouldn't talk about looks. But the way that she's like skirting around the subject, if I were him, I'd be like, does she look like a troll? Like, why is she so scared of me looking at her? She's a pretty girl. So again, it's unfortunate that she feels that way and that she's acting in this way. And it's only going to continue. Again, you guys, she is giving me Chelsea vibes. I am severely annoyed. But he takes her back after she tried to self-sabotage. So again, we're now at a date with Leo and Hannah. Hannah's like, hi, and he's like, hey, I heard that you know who I'm dating. Like, let's address the elephant in the room. Hannah's being super chill about it. She's like, no, like, no worries. She said it by accident. Like, it slipped. It's fine. Like, they have an overall chill attitude, these two. And I feel like, they vibe really well, but I don't foresee them vibing in real life because he's a scrub and she is Hannah. And he also keeps deliberating like who he should choose with all the guys in the break room. It's really like in poor taste. And it doesn't help that he has zero game and he continues to like put his foot in his mouth. We see him on a date with Brittany, and again, this is Jimmy, Jessica all over again. It's like that one conversation they had like before they broke up, where she's like, how do you feel about me? And this is what's happening between Brittany and Leo. He's like, this is the hardest thing that I've ever had to go through. And she's like, same. And he's like, listen, like, I just would like to take the time to decide. And she's like, why don't you just tell me right now? Like, just tell me. And he's like, I don't know. I care for both of you equally. So I want to take the time to figure that out. But it's equal for me. And she just can't fathom that the love of her life, her husband, would be debating between her and another girl. So she does the thing that Jessica did, where she's like, I need reassurance that you care about me. Otherwise, I could just leave. And it's that thing where you're like, choose me or I leave. But then at the same time, she's like, but I want you to take your time and I want you to make your choice. And it's like, which one is it? Because you are applying pressure. Brittany starts crying because she's like, I want this to be a fun date. I hate that like this is like the deciding factor date. Like, I deserve joy. But she kind of led the conversation into this ditch. But then he promises to her, he's like, you know what? Tonight, you're gonna get a surprise and we get to have a fun light date tonight. And she's like, okay. Because again, she's really holding on. And it's just so funny because she keeps giving him all these chances and he could say things that could soften the load, but he is physically incapable of being a sweet talker. The next date that we see is Hannah and Leo. And they're having like a bacon, egg, and cheese. They're having a super casual breakfast. And so now he's getting down to the wire. So he's being more specific about his financial insecurities. And he's like, listen, it's important to me that we sign a prenup. Are you down? And she's like, yeah, totally. Like, I'm not here for your money. Funny, I haven't heard him say that to Brittany yet. And that's the one that he's really gonna need. Then asks Hannah about her insecurities. And she talks about her body stuff. She's like, I gained a lot of weight during COVID. I lost 40-something pounds last year. She discusses that this trauma comes from like her childhood. Her mom used to lock up the cabinet so that she wouldn't grab snacks. Too close to home. He doesn't say much about her body comments, but he is making notes of it. And I think that if she were to choose him and he choose her, it would come up. And so he's giving Hannah the same workaround, like, it's between you and my other connection. Like, I really care for you both. And Hannah's like, totally, because I too have another connection that I care about. So moral of the story is that someone is getting broken up with tonight. We see a date with Hannah and Nick. And as we discussed, she was just having a bacon, egg, and cheese with Leo. In this date, Nick has salads for them. And I cracked up and I was like, oh, she's gonna break up with him because of the salad. And he asks her like how her date was. And she's like, I don't want to talk about my other connection. Like, I just want to focus on us. And it's fine, you know, like he doesn't cry about it. But like I said, they're down to the wire. So she's like, okay, let's talk about your career. You took a pivot from being an athlete to being in real estate. I quit my job. Can you take care of me? Because I'm going to need support. And he's like, you know, like, I'm not making tons as a real estate agent. Like, there's levels, but like, I'm doing okay. Like, we may have to work on that. That means no. He cannot take care of you, girl. You may have to live at home with your parents until you get a job. Though it's a little uncomfortable, he does answer her questions, and then she shares that while his insecurity is money, her insecurity is weight. And again, she rehashes the whole locked cabinet situation. And when she addresses the weight thing, she's like, and that is why I took offense when you were asking me what I was wearing and when you were asking me about the bikini. And he's like, oh, I get it. I'm sorry, like, I think I was coming on too strong, but I want you to understand that, like, I already think you're beautiful and I will always, like, go out of my way to make you feel beautiful. And I'm just like, oh my God. And I'm with Hannah. I'm like, wow, he's saying all the right things. I just feel like when you are that deeply insecure, it doesn't matter what anyone says. So, like, I just don't see this being fruitful, even if she chooses him. I think that he's the better option out of the two guys. I just still don't think that he's the best option for Hannah, just universally. And their connection is growing, and we see her be like, wow, like, you are so much deeper than people know. And he's so appreciative that, like, she really sees him. And he tells her, I love you. And she's squealing, and she's like, oh my God, like, I was so confused, but right now, like, I know that I love you too. So this is like the deciding factor for her. She's like, okay, Nikki D is my person. Keep that in your back pocket. The next scene we see is of Leo and Brittany. This is supposed to be their fun date, remember? His grand old surprise is just a recycled little token that he's seen from the other guys, from Tyler. He gives her like a blanket with his perfume. Nothing special. He recycled that, okay? So she's like on the couch with his blanket, and he's like, okay, we have important matters to discuss. What kind of ring do you like? Because I feel like that's important to you, right? And she's like, well, I'll answer that if you're only asking me. And he's like, well, no, I would be asking both of you or neither of you. Like, it's part of the experiment. And she's like, well, I just don't think that I need to answer that if you're also asking another girl. Again, missing the point of what this experiment is, but also this is supposed to be their fun date. And they're about to have the same argument. And so this is idiotic of him, but the delusional in me understands that he wants to build a fantasy with each of them because he wants to picture it and decide which fantasy he would want to partake in more. However, Brittany is not she doesn't want to be complicit in this like fantasy building. She's like, choose me. Yeah, I said you had time. You need to choose me or I need to go home. And he kind of just like disregards what she's saying. And he's like, you seem like you're dainty, like maybe like a big rock and like a nice classy ring. And she ultimately is like, you know exactly what I like. And they're fine. It's the weirdest thing. Like nothing about it would feel good. She's literally like still puffy faced, like, you know me so well. Yes, I want a big rock. And she's just in tears, like, honestly, like, I'm afraid that I'm going to resent you. And I feel like even if you choose me, a part of me will resent you for putting me through this. And he's like, well, if you feel that way, like, maybe this is not a good fit because, like, I don't want that. And she kind of, like, takes it back, but she said what she said. Now we're at the tail end of things, okay, you guys? We overhear in the men's room, Leo asking someone, like, should I ask her why she asked for another date with Nick? Like, what's the deal with that? Simultaneously, we see Nick talking to Ramses, and he's like, yeah, I followed your advice, and I told her that I love her. And slightly in that moment, I was like, is this a game to you too, Nick? Or like, are you just happy and proud that you spoke up for yourself? I can't tell. In the ladies' room, we see Hannah telling the girls, like, I'm in love, like, Nick is the one for me. And Brittany overhears, and someone's like, you're dumping Leo? And she's like, yes. And they're all cheering because they're like, oh my God. Now Brittany can be with Leo, you can be with Nick, everyone's happy. You see the combo with Hannah and Leo, okay? Before they go into this pod, Leo says, I want to want her. Like he wants to want Hannah. And already, if you're forcing it because you think that she's the ideal fit, but you don't actually want her, what are you doing? So I'm glad that Hannah went in here and she was like, listen, I actually am going to move forward with my other connection. It's much stronger. We've discussed that we love each other. And she's like, I thought that you and I would get there, but we didn't. And I got there with this guy. And he's like, come again? Like, he is so disturbed that she has made this decision and he has had no say. He keeps asking, like, how far are you with this guy? Like, what commitments have you made? Like you're not too far gone. Like, you can still be here. Like, I want you. I want this. And she's like, but you don't, because you keep telling me that you're still choosing between two people. Like, this guy has decided. And I hate that it took her a minute to be like, I've picked this guy. She just keeps leading with, Nick has picked me. And so Leo's like, wait, are you being with him because he told you I love you first? Like, if I would have said I love you first, would you be dumping him? And she can't answer it. And I think she can't answer it is because he's coming in hot. He's practically yelling at her, like, can you give me a chance? Like, can we still fight for this? And he won't take no for an answer. He won't break up with her. To the point that he's yelling and she's weeping. Like, she can't form a sentence because she is being cornered. Just keeps saying, I'm so confused. I'm so confused. And I do think that this is a confusing process. But I also, he's not saying, I want you and only you, like I'd quit everyone else. He's saying, please don't quit on me because I want to have the opportunity to choose between the two of you. Like, it's very selfish. And in that moment, I don't think that she saw through that. So she like steps away. She's like, I have to go to sleep. I have to go. Like, he was really trying to get in her head. Like, if I proposed to you right now, what would you say? When he wasn't even gonna propose. You know what I mean? Like, it was nasty. I will say though, before she leaves, he does tell her that he loves her. And she is as red as a tomato. It was just so like off-putting that he was like trying to force her to make a decision, even though she technically came into the room with one already made, but he wanted her to like forcefully like give him a chance. But she apparently had the night to sleep it off and think about it. And she woke up and she was like, this man was trying to manipulate me. Like, that was so foul. And I think Brittany should know before she moves forward the kind of guy that she's dealing with. And she gives Brittany the lowdown. And so then the next thing we see is Hannah back in the room with Leo, and she's ready to give him a piece of her mind. And this is bonkers. So he apologizes for raising his voice, and she was like, yeah, thank you. Like, I felt really ashamed and I felt cornered, and that wasn't okay. And for a moment, I thought that she was going to entertain his BS, and I was like, girl, quit. But ultimately, she's like, Nick is the one. Like, what I feel for him is not here. And then there's a beat that happens, and Leo is like, yeah, it's probably for the best because you and I aren't compatible. And you can see Hannah being like, you were just saying that we are so compatible that we would have all of this like beauty in our future. And now because I've dumped you, we're not compatible? Okay, right? But it doesn't stop at that. He's like, yeah, you and Nick are meant to be just like Brittany and I are meant to be. So it's probably for the best. And then he asks Brittany when she goes back into the women's quarters to make sure to tell Brittany that this was a mutual breakup. And I see what he's doing. It was in fact not mutual. He actually did get dumped, and he doesn't want Brittany to feel like he is going to choose her now because she's the second option. So he's really trying to like lay the groundwork to be like, oh yeah, well, you know, it makes sense that we're just not compatible. I'm glad that we could agree on this. No, sir, you got dumped. And you could see Hannah being like, no, I am not going to be a mouthpiece for you because your relationship with Brittany is between y'all. So you can go ahead and mend that. And this man is backpedaling so hard. He's like, yeah, you know, like I'm talking to you here, but all I can think about is proposing to Brittany. And it's just so funny because it's almost like he's realized that he's on camera and that Brittany will eventually see this. So how do I lay the groundwork to make her think that all I can think about is her, even in moments with Hannah? I love that Hannah's like, if you felt that way, then why did you beg for me yesterday? Why didn't you just propose to Brittany? And it was just hilarious when he went back into the men's room. Like, he really was like putting on a show, like it was a mutual breakup. And I hope that Nick saw through that because it was such BS. So the next thing that we see is Hannah and Nick. And at this point, she's like, ugh, I've dumped the dead weight. Like, I'm all about you. She's like, before I was scared, I was unsure, but now I'm sure, I know. And like, he's like, you're the most beautiful person I've never met. He gets on bended knee. He proposes. It's a yes. Of course. It's beautiful. He was like, you know, when we met, I knew that we could be friends. As we talked, I knew that we could be friends for life. But now, like, I know you're the love of my life. It was a very sweet proposal. When it's time for them to meet in person, I want to get straight into this one. Anyway, she has a gorgeous face card, and I think that is the saving grace of this entire look. The doors open, and he's affirming her immediately, which great job. I couldn't read how she was feeling from her face initially. But we find out. A few things are coming to mind. One, he was a football player, but she imagined him to be bulkier and he's like slimmer. And it's making her feel self-conscious because her stature, she feels like it's bigger. So she's already feeling a way about having a bigger build than him. He refers to him as tiny, which I wouldn't go that far. And like when they're seated and they're talking, I can tell with her body language that she is not into him. At least not at first. Like, this isn't her ideal preference. And we'll talk more about that in Mexico. But that's the end of them. This video is ending with Leo and Brittany. So, you know, he's been dumped. Brittany knows he's been dumped. And like now the tables have turned. She's at the position where she gets to choose. It's not just him wanting to be with her. She can decide if she can forgive him for doing X, Y, and Z, right? So she steps into the room with this dose of power. He's babbling on about how no one else matters, okay? He's working overtime to stroke her ego. Brittany lets him know. She's like, I don't like that to everyone else. This looks like I'm your second choice. Regardless, when he proposes, she says yes. And it's time for them to meet. She looks stunning in this red gown, and he's matching her with a red tie. Doors open, they embrace, they hug. He's like, wow, I have the hottest girl. He's like all over her, you guys, like all over her. And he's like, wow, like I love you so much. And she's like, I'm not ready to say that. Like when I tell it to you, like I want to mean it. And I'm like, that's valid. But if you feel that way, why accept a proposal at all, you know? And they're in this couch and he is coming on strong physically. And it could be that she's not comfortable because they're on camera, or she's just not attracted to him, or it's too much too soon. But he's literally like going over her and she's like, It was very uncomfortable to see. And she's so tiny, like you could like squish her. Like it's a lot. And in her one-on-one, she's like, I'm engaged, but something is not computing. Like she just, her body is not connecting the fact that this is like her person. And so she doesn't look as happy. She's just like, what have I done? And when they say goodbye, she's like, if we don't go to Mexico, we're going to go to Miami, right? We're going to go to Miami. And he's like, yeah, totally, Miami. And I'm like, why would you be planning for Miami if everyone goes to Mexico? Well, they must have known something that we didn't know, because then this image comes on the screen that says that they weren't selected by producers to be one of the couples that goes to Mexico. So they went to Miami on their own. And then a few weeks later, they ended their engagement. So I am dying to know what happened there. That is crazy. You guys, I've been yapping for like 2 hours. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. I need to know all of your predictions for this season. This season is so crazy. I really thought that we would see much more maturity, but this is just the beginning. I still have to tell you guys the mess that's happening in Mexico. So do subscribe so that you can see my next video. That will be coming to you shortly after this one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.